All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am your host, Matt Yancik, to another episode of Roleplayer with 1,000 Faces. It has been a minute, as the kids say. I've been a little bit busy since the last episode, just sort of like getting things together. By things, I mean my life, my job, my place where I live. My cat's been angry at me. All kinds of things. My mother has been upset with me. I haven't been visiting as much as I should. And it's really great to be back, though, to bring everyone a really awesome guest here for tonight. But before I tell you who the guest is, because it wouldn't be my show unless I teased a whole bunch of stuff before this and then brought the guest out. I did just want to say a thank you to all of you that have been subscribing. I know I've been saying this for the last month or two, but like my subs have been kind of going up, which is very relative, right? So when I say going up, I mean like, oh my gosh, I'm getting like 1 or 2 people a day. This is like really good for me. This is amazing. I'm like a rocket. I'm the little rocket that could. And we're getting close to like 450. Which is really great for me. And one thing I really appreciate is the fact that while I may not be a really big channel like some people on the program tonight, I do have like a nice little community, and I feel like really happy that I can like talk to people individually. And by the way, RPGs with DBJ is in the chat tonight, and DBJ. If you're listening, and I know you are because I just saw you in the chat, it's good to see you back. I hope that the Christmas season didn't like get you down too much with all the packages that were needing to be delivered. But I'm really happy to see you back, and I hope we can catch up at some point. But my mother is texting me already and telling me that I'm going on for far too long. And I'm ignoring my guest. So I guess it's time to introduce none other than Matt Click. Now, you'll know Matt Click, of course, from his channel, aFistfulofDice. And I don't know, like, I was always trying to figure out, like, it's all crammed together with, like, brackets around it and stuff. Like, I don't know if you pronounce if you say bracket, a fistful of dice, bracket, close bracket, open bracket. I'm not really sure. But he's been running that channel for 10 years now. He is a seasoned veteran streamer. But you know what? Most other channels would bring you a streamer, and that would be enough. That would be enough. They'd just be like, my goodness, I've got a streamer. What more could you want? I don't bring you just streamers. I bring you role-playing professionals. This man is trained and certified in role-playing creation. So Matt Click, he's not just a guru. He's not that guy up at the top of the mountain that you all like walk to and pledge to. He's also that guy that you come to when you need something cool created. So he happens to have worked for, like, there's these small companies. I don't know. I'm just going to list them because I've never heard of them before, but maybe you have. Maybe we'll hit something that somebody knows. Something called Wizards of the Coast, Green Ronin. I don't know why Ronin would want to be green. Onyx Path Publishing. I don't know. I have no idea what those guys have done. Cubicle 7, our Talsorian Games. I have no idea who they are. And somebody called Free League Publishing, and then Microsoft. I'm not sure. They sound like a fly-by-night sort of company. But, I figured I'd ask him on the program anyway because he seems like a cool guy. So without further ado, yes, Mom, I know. Without further ado, let us welcome to the program Matt Click. Matt, it's so nice to meet someone with the same name as me.
Oh man, we're just so few and far between. I've never met another Matt before.
Can I wait? Even before, like, ladies and gentlemen, this is rude and this is off the rails already. But can I make a comment here?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that there seem to be a lot of Matts around, like, in the role playing?
Oh yeah.
Like, sphere. What do you? Can I ask?
Yeah.
Even though, ladies and gentlemen, I usually give like a list of questions. But I haven't prepared Matt Click for this at all because I just want to know his deepest, darkest thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Why do you think there are so many Matts in role playing? I don't get it.
I don't know. I really don't know. And there have always been a lot of mats like in gaming in general. Like I used to work at a hobby shop, and like half the people that would come in and play Magic the Gathering were mat. And so I think it's just for some reason us mats just gravitate towards dice and cards and
yeah. I don't get it. Like, it's really strange. Like, it's so weird. And what's weirder, and I know that, again, we're off the rails, and my mother's going to be very angry about this, but I was at Starbucks the other day, and I was kind of like working on some questions for the program, and I swear to you, I heard someone kept calling, like, you know, my name is Matt, and they said, called Matt, and I got my drink, and then I sat down, and I kept hearing Matt all the time, and all these Matts were kind of piling into Starbucks. It was very, very strange.
I was at Emerald City Comic-Con this weekend, and I spent half the time looking around because someone somewhere in the convention was going Matt, because there were just so many Matts packed into one space. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sorry, Matt. Already your impression of what this program is going to be is just completely
no. This is great. This is what I signed up for. This
good. Oh, good. All right. That's different than the usual answer I get. But now let's just get down to the meat and potatoes of it. I know that I did a little bit of research on you before the program, and being an English teacher, I can usually sniff these things out. I discovered that you majored in English. I feel like a proud like English teacher, like knowing this. Can you tell me, like, did you envision your life as like a game creator, like and like an editor and writer and RPGer and all of that, or did you think you were going to do something else with your English degree?
So I honestly, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my English degree. And originally, when I was in college, I was actually a communications major, and I was thinking about going into like journalism. Yeah. And then, I got into communications classes and was sort of like, this isn't really what I want to be doing. And so I decided, sort of spur of the moment, to switch to English and go down that path. And it was always kind of this thing of like, an English degree doesn't necessarily have jobs attached to it, but it is one of those degrees that you can kind of leverage into lots of different things. It's kind of one of those jack of all trades sort of degrees where it's like, everybody needs someone who knows how words work, or how to write words, or how to make things sound good to readers. And so I figured, I could always get a job working in marketing or working with like websites, doing web copy or whatever. And that's kind of what I did out of college, was that sort of work, working with web developers and marketing companies, and worked at a civil engineering firm for a stint, doing editing for technical specifications, which was not my favorite job in the world. That sounds,
when you say that, though, it sounds like a combination of like Star Wars and Indiana Jones all wrapped into.
Man, I wish that's what it was.
Or actually, I'm sorry, did I say it sounded like it? I said, yeah, meant the opposite of that. Okay.
Right. But no, I never really thought that a job in games would be something that would be possible for me. It didn't seem like an attainable goal, but I just like worked at it for a long time, and it wasn't my job for a very long time, and then it was able to be my job.
Yeah.
So
is it so out like? I know, and again, I did a little bit of research into this, but from what I understand, you were into role-playing games at a young age, and I actually would put it as like a typical kind of age, at least the age maybe I started, my friend started.
It was like 11 or 12 is when I kind of got into it, yeah.
Was there any like connection in your mind thinking, well, my goodness, there is a possibility someone must write these things, like, or did you really think you were just, was that maybe somewhere in the back of your head, or was it just completely not even present, like?
I think that was always kind of in the back of my mind. And I think that like I got into role-playing games right around the same time that I got into like the idea of being a writer, or, working with words. And And so I think it always was kind of a possibility or a thought, I guess. And I remember like in high school and stuff, like when they were still publishing like Dungeon and Dragon, the two magazines that were put out around D&D 3rd edition, looking at those and thinking like, I bet I could write articles for publications like this and kind of, get started doing that, or edit articles for magazines like this. And obviously that, is not really, that's not like a good path to go down anymore, as those magazines no longer exist. But there was always that kind of idea in the back of my mind of like, maybe I could work on games, or maybe I could make games. And, getting into role-playing games, getting into Dungeons and Dragons around that age, like you're constantly making stuff for the game. You're hardly ever using stuff out of the box. And I was always like designing things and like writing adventures and drawing maps and stuff like that. And I don't know, it always seemed like if this could be a job, that would be fun.
Right. So what's your story as far as getting hooked on games goes? Was there a friend? Was there a family member? Was there someone that introduced you, or was it something you just saw on the shelves and you're like, I want to check that out?
No, so my my dad introduced me to games, and the first game we played was Star Wars D6, the old West End Games edition of the Star Wars role-playing game, which is still one of my favorite games of all time. I may or may not have a hack of that exists out in the internet somewhere. If you search for Hyperspace D6, you might find it.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's me.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So that's what I got started on. And that really grabbed me because like Star Wars was like my life at that time. I just adored Star Wars, and being able to go on adventures in the Star Wars universe as a character that I created was it just really, really resonated with me. And then from there, like Dungeons and Dragons, like 3rd edition came out like right around that time. And so my dad like bought the like beginner set with the pre-gen characters and everything. And like my dad was my dungeon master for like most of my adolescence and into my teens. And then, in high school started to play with like friends and stuff, and then had a game group in college. But yeah, my dad is the one who kind of put me onto it. And now he's a game designer as well.
Oh, wow.
He created a game called Ironsworn, and another game called Ironsworn Starforged, and I helped a little bit with those games. But we also have been fortunate enough to have been hired as a kind of a duo to design games for various people. So him getting me started as a kid has grown into a professional relationship in some aspects, where we've been able to work on projects together.
Oh, wow. I had not known. And now I feel unprepared to ask questions, because that to me is like a can of worms. Like, what is it like? Like, I've never worked in a professional capacity with any of I don't think I'd want to work with my family members. What is that? What is that exactly like? How does that work? Like, I mean, did he bring you in? Do you bring him in? Like,
yeah,
how do you divide up the labor? And
yeah, so initially it was he was writing a supplement for his game Ironsworn. It was called Delve, and it added like dungeon delving mechanics to this game. And he asked me if I wanted to work on it with him, and I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. And so he would have various things for me to work on or write, and we would get together and like, hash stuff out and play test things together. And then based on that, I think it was Free League reached out to him and asked if he would develop the solo rules for the One Ring, the 2nd edition of the One Ring that they were putting out.
Yeah, okay.
And then and he was like, I would love to, but I'm gonna need somebody else to work on it. I can't do it by myself. So I'm gonna bring on Matt Click too. So he brought me on for that. And then I guess Free League liked it because they wanted us to do the solo rules for Dragonbane as well. So we got to work on Dragonbane as well together. And I don't know, it's never been like weird or anything working with my dad on projects, just because like we've always kind of made stuff together. Like we've always been like, even not even necessarily writing stuff, but we like in the garage, like making terrains for minis to, play on. And we've always had like creative things that we've collaborated on together. And so this is just kind of a next step. And the fact that each of us kind of independently along our own paths also ended up doing some professional role-playing game work, it kind of worked out that we were able to kind of team up and do some stuff together. So yeah, it's been great. I enjoy working with him on stuff. So
that's like, to me, it's actually a really interesting and impressive and I'm not exactly sure how to put it, but I mean, I have buddies who, so I never got married, never had any kids myself, but I have good friends who are sort of passing on the legacy of role playing with their own children. And I look at that sometimes, and I, for viewers at home, they probably already know this, I'm an English teacher, so I often sort of pass it on to my students. But the idea of sort of like, you know, fostering a couple children and sort of bringing them along in the role-playing world and sort of helping them. I mean, it's actually kind of touching. Like it's really like a sweet
for sure
thing, like between a parent and a child for something like
absolutely that. Well, and now I have a kid of my own, and so it's kind of, it's like I see her, she's only 4, but she loves to make things and come up with stories, and she has just such a vibrant, active imagination, and I just nurture that. I'm just like nurturing that flame. And at some point here, very soon, she's going to want to know what all the books are on my shelf, and I'm going to get to introduce her to role-playing games.
Have to sit down and have the talk.
Yes, have the talk, exactly.
So it sounds like, from sort of listening to your upbringing and your childhood here, it sounds like you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're kind of like you started as a forever DM, like you just were naturally creating a lot of stuff. I mean, even though your father's running the games when you're younger, but it sounds like you're you're on the creative. And do you see yourself as like a forever DM, or?
A little bit, I do, just because, well, especially in like with home groups and with people that I know, like I'm always the one running the game. I'm always the one bringing the game to the table and preparing things and stuff. But I also think that that's a role that I just naturally find myself gravitating towards. I like playing. I really like playing games, and I'm actually the only game that I'm in at the moment is a game where I'm a player. And I really enjoy that. I like being able to sort of like embody a character, but I feel that naturally I gravitate more towards embodying like a world and a setting than I do embodying a single character. It's easier for me to think about like the big picture of a world and the different kind of moving pieces and parts of a world than it is for me to think about like, now what would my character do in this situation? Like that's a little bit more taxing for me mentally than dungeon mastering, which seems silly to say because there's so much involved in running a game and prepping a game, but for me it has always felt not easier, but I feel more naturally attuned to that as like a creative thing.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that, because I often sort of I think you actually stated it pretty well. Like it feels taxing to me when I'm trying to focus on being a character. And you're right. It's counterintuitive, because you would think that there are so many people online or wherever who say, oh my goodness, I had to juggle all these balls, and it was really hard. But to me, and it sounds like to you, it's actually kind of easy and more enjoyable to think about these pieces and place them. Why do you think our brains and the brain of the forever DM sort of works like that? Any particular reason that might be, or?
I don't know. I think it's just, everyone's brain kind of works differently, and I don't know. It's like whatever combination of goop is making up my cerebrum up here, like whatever's going on up there, it's just more locked into thinking about how a world works and what characters populate it and what the different kinds of like cultures are, and that to me is more interesting than thinking about the backstory of a single character, I guess. And I think that's also why I've always really struggled with like writing fiction, because I get to the point where I'm having to think about this, who's the protagonist and what's their deal and what do they think about and what are their hopes and dreams. And I'm just like, I don't know. What's the world look like? What cool things exist in this world? And that's why games are so fun, is because the protagonists come to the table and they present themselves to me as the characters, and then I go, cool, now here's this world that I've created for you to explore, and they just do that. It's much easier.
Or here's this world to screw up all your plans, which is
well, that
kind
too,
of like,
yes.
I get like I get like a fun sort of thrill from taking the characters' wants, desires, needs, and backgrounds, and then like sort of gleefully twisting them and giving back. Like, in a way, it's not twisting them to make it hard, but twisting them to show them just how much the character they have to be, or I don't know if that makes exactly
and
sense.
how much their character can exist in the world and can affect the world too. Because if there are pieces of their backstory and pieces of the actions that they've taken during the campaign, and those are affecting the world, and there are NPCs coming out of the woodwork that they know from before the campaign started and things like that, like that makes the world feel so alive, and it makes them feel more invested in their characters too.
Do you, speaking of which, I know this is a silly question to ask you, do you prepare for your games? Do you, like, what sort of prep? Sometimes, every once in a while, when I feel like just not riffing.
No, so
what sort of prep do you do for your? Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen, I know you haven't seen his private games, obviously, because he doesn't stream them. But if you haven't seen Matt's games, you can just head over to all of the links, and all of that are in what another Matt Colville calls the doobly-doo below. Please do check that out and prepare to be pretty impressed, because that was one of the things that really impressed me when I was first, because I had a buddy, I'll mention him because he's a fan of yours, James, who recommended your game, the Provokers, to me, and I checked it out. And one thing I was really sort of impressed by was it balances very well, to me, the interaction between the GM and the player, but more interestingly, you also balance the idea of playing a game with streaming a game. And so there are moments where, like, there's a bit of a pause where you are kind of like talking about, or where you are describing the setting, describing some lore, talking about a situation, and it kind of creates like this little axes where there are these four things you have to kind of balance, and that was what I was most sort of interested and impressed with, and tried to steal from my own actual place. And so what is, how did you decide on that, or what are you doing to create that sort of, like, how did you create, like, say, your first stream? What are you preparing?
Yeah, so I think that, like, I'm someone who never preps the same way twice, and I remember, like, I would put out videos on my channel where it would be like, here's how I prep, and I'd always have to preface it with, here's how I prep right now. I probably don't prep like this anymore, and I never have before, and I probably never will again, but here's what's working for me right now in this moment in time,
in my current mood.
So, but yes, yeah, exactly. Well, and it depends too on the style of the game too. Like, for the Provokers, like, there was much less prep involved in that campaign, just because it was so player driven. And I would have, like, ideas of, like, the big pieces and the big plot points that I sort of had in mind for that sort of, like, for what was going to happen. But session to session, I would normally show up with, like, a page of bullet points, and it was usually like, here's, like, a few scenes that I think are going to happen, but then here's also some, like, notes on, like, this specific character that I want to focus on. So, like, okay, we're going to Stone Rift and we're going to meet Durgan's family, so I have some notes on, like, what's Durgan's family's deal, what's his brother's name, what's his dad, that sort of thing. But then for, like I've run Legend of the Five Rings, which for me required so much more prep, and I was, like, meticulous about my notes and, like, the setting info, and I would make sure that I would have like specific words and phrases and, like, all of that kind of stuff, and I had it in, like, multi-tabbed, like, organized thing. But I never prep like that otherwise. It just, for that specific campaign, for whatever my mind was doing at that time, for that world, for that story that I wanted to tell, that sort of prep worked for me. Other times it's like note cards, sometimes I'm typing, sometimes I'm writing in a book. So it changes all the time. But I think that the like one constant is that I shy away from over prepping, and I do most of my prep happens in my brain before the game, like leading up to the game. I think about, I have like I call it a subroutine. I have it running. If I'm running a game, there's always a little subroutine in my brain that's just kind of spooling, where it's just like I'm always sort of thinking about stuff with the game. And occasionally I have like and I'll need to write it down or something. But it is just it's sort of a constant thing where I always have something to think about. And if I'm running a game, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. If that makes any sense.
I honestly think that makes a lot of sense, because for myself, I'm right now, even after running games for like 35 something years, I still struggle with how much is too much, how much is not enough.
Yeah.
What do I do for a stream versus what I would do for my private games or whatever, and how I would present it. And all of those like factors kind of like are balanced in my head. And one thing I sort of noticed is that when I don't actually mind over prepping. Anybody that knows me, I am the prepper of RPGs. Like if I were like, if you could picture a guy like in like a flak jacket and like machine guns and like MREs like on the shelves, I am the equivalent of that for RPGs, right? And the problem though is that sometimes I prep so much and I have such an idea of how it's going to go that I can't sift through my notes properly, and I find that I'm not in the game. And the best thing I found sometimes for me is to do all the prep and then take that and set it aside and just know that I've done all this prep and allow myself to fall into the game. And when I fall into the game, then the best stuff will kind of like not fall through the sifter. It'll get stuck there, and then I'll be able to kind of exploit it and mix it with what the players are doing. And it sounds a lot like that's what works for you. And I can understand also what you're saying about like Legend of the Five Rings. Like from watching your games, one of the things I was sort of thinking in my head is the concept of like the boxed text, the boxed description or whatever, you use it, but you're using it, to me, the right way. You're setting mood and tone, and you're not just interjecting it, and it's at the right moments, and you kind of take your players out, bring them back in, let the viewers know. And to me, like the idea of, it doesn't surprise me that you would have to do an incredible amount, because for Legend of the Five Rings, you're being faithful to someone else's world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like kind of rules and different cultural things that happen in the setting of Rokugan, where it's like, the Rokugan that I want to present is a faithful interpretation of that setting. That's not always the case. Sometimes I'll be like, this is kind of this setting, but not really. But for some reason with Legend of the Five Rings, I felt like this kind of reverence with it, where I wanted to present it as faithfully as possible. And that honestly was kind of fun for me, because I'm not normally that way. So it was just something new.
What would you say, like, if you could take, I'm your teacher now, and I'm telling you, Mr. Click, put your modesty aside, tell us what you're doing really well. What do you bring to the table that you think your players like to return to, and the viewers come back to watch? Like I saw some people talking about how the Provokers will blow your socks off, along with everything else.
Who said that?
That was okay. Hellmage, you are in trouble with Matt Click.
No, that's that. I know.
And his
Hellmage.
name is Matthew, by the way.
Yes, I was gonna say another Matt has entered the chat. No. So something that
What do you do? What do you do so well? Tell us. Be honest. Come on now. Set your modesty aside. What are you really happy with and proud of what do you think you do really well?
So I think that I do. Okay. I think that the thing that I enjoy doing the most is the thing that I think I do well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the reason why I enjoy doing it, is because I feel like I'm doing it proficiently. Mm-hmm. Is I like, once you get a few sessions into a campaign and there are all these kind of like loose threads hanging out, like you've created these plot points. The players have created these story beats. Some of them have gone places and some of them haven't. But for some reason, I'm always very cognizant of what threads are kind of hanging out. And I like tying them together. I like pulling stuff that already exists in the world and making it the thing, making it the revelation, making it the plot twist or the new adventure that they're going to go on. I think that I have a good head for like the meta of a world and like the story that's being told. Not that I'm telling a story, but that I am facilitating a story being told, and I can kind of guide it in certain directions. I think that I'm good at that. It's very hard for me to say.
Wow.
I'm good.
Just lay on the psychologist, lay on the psychiatrist's couch here, and let's tell me all about your childhood, and well, okay.
Let's get into it.
Okay, Matt, let's take the knife and stick it in here. And now I'm going to ask you, what is the thing, but I'm even going to do it in a teacherly way, in a productive way. What's the thing you think that has maybe changed the most, and like how have you maybe matured or evolved as like a DM? Like, is there something that like I was looking at like your first couple of streams, and because I like to compare them to the first couple of streams I always do, because I'm always scared. I'm like, am I better or worse than these people? Because if I'm worse, I better just quit. If I'm and I don't know. The first thing I was struck by was like how like when I look at my own streams, I look back just a few years and I'm like, holy cow, I was so young and I was so bright-eyed and I wasn't cynical. What do you think, like, compared to like, oh man, if you were looking at that Matt Click and you look at your first like couple, what would you tell Matt Click about how he's going to change and evolve?
That is like such a good question. I don't know. Like, honestly, it's such a trip because like I basically like I had my 20s like sort of on YouTube. Like I can look back 10 years and see, however I 20, 24, 25, like doing this. And I'm like, in a lot of ways, I'm the same person. In a lot of ways, I'm a completely different person. And I see myself in that person, but I also don't know who that person is or like what they were thinking or the things that they were doing. But I think that I would probably tell him that I don't need to treat it like a job because YouTube's not going to be your job.
What?
But you should continue.
Don't tell me that. I'm about to cry.
To have fun with it and just keep doing it because even though, let me double back here. Even though YouTube and streaming didn't end up being something that I could do professionally, not that I was ever really trying to do that, but it was always kind of in the back of my mind, especially when the channel started taking off. But it has opened so many doors for me. It has led to so many different opportunities because this happens less often now, but interviewing or talking with different companies and publishers, there would be people who would have heard of me or seen me or were aware that I had a YouTube channel and could go look and see, okay, this guy runs games. He's obviously very passionate about it. I feel like it opened a lot of doors for me professionally later on. But at the time, I wish that I was less focused on like making sure that everything looked good and sounded good and that the game was exactly the way I wanted to present it and things like that. And I wish that I just focused more on having fun with it. Yeah. And I think that's why the Provokers has the staying power and people go back and watch it and stuff, is because I had a lot of fun running that game. The game was fun.
I think like you have so much material on your channel. I couldn't watch all of it, but
I wouldn't advise you to either.
You heard it here, folks. First,
don't watch all my videos.
Don't watch Matt Click. Not everything. He's gonna put up a list and I think, to be honest though, like watching your first few videos and then sort of jumping ahead and watching a few like a year later and then a year later after all that, I can see that evolution. And I can see it in the Provokers, like, because I remember from the first the first few moments. I remember there was a part where you kind of dropped off the stream at a certain point, and the others are kind of like making some jokes about it. It was pretty funny. But
yeah, there was like technical difficulties.
There were some
at the
technical
end, yeah.
difficulties, but I was sort of, when I referenced the boxed description, I do remember some really great pieces of clearly things that you had prepped and written out before that you could see, like you had put such time and effort into it. And while, you can see the technical ways that you've grown over the course of the channel, it's kind of like, I think to a professional that's looking, they're not looking at, okay, is his camera straight or is the lighting okay? They're looking at the beauty of the thing that you're creating, right? And the potential of that. Like if this guy had like a Hollywood lighting set, this would be fantastic. This would be like watching a stage play between several different actors that are ad-libbing and all of that. So I really think, that is something that impressed me about your channel. And I think it does show. Was Provokers your breakout? What?
Yeah. So it's also like kind of muddled in my mind of like what happened first and what occurred. But I do think that Provokers was kind of the thing that sort of like was the biggest growth that I saw over the course of the channel. Cause I think that when I started Provokers, I had like a few thousand subs and there were a few Provokers streams where we would have like 100 and 120 people like hanging out in the chat. And I remember that was just inconceivable. And that has never happened since and did not happen before. But the few sessions in there where people were like showing up to Provokers to watch Provokers. Yeah, like that was the biggest growth that my channel saw. I think that was like around the time when it kind of took off. Yeah.
What was it then about Provokers in general? I know you said that it's probably the one where you really had the most fun and you were really into it, but what was it about it? And pardon this, I don't mean to use a pun. What like clicked and made it kind of, I swear to you people, I didn't want to.
No, anytime you can work a click pun into the conversation is good. I think that in some ways it's like it was sort of lightning in a bottle, but I don't want to diminish the effort and like the work that I put into it. And honestly, like the players, like I assembled those guys together like that. I reached out to each of them individually. Yeah. And like in each of those guys, like I found not just a player for a game, but like a friend that I like, I still hang out with Tim and Barker and I like with Nate, like those are people that I really, really enjoyed playing with and people who I think clicked, not just with me, but with each other as well. And that would play off of each other. And so I think that had a lot to do with it was just the natural chemistry that we had. Like it did kind of feel like we were just like getting together and rolling dice and playing games, but also like telling a cool story. Yeah. But I also think that it was kind of the time, like 5th edition had just come out. There weren't a ton. It was kind of still not a ton of games going on. Critical Role was just getting spun up and there was opportunity in this sort of wild west of, online role-playing games streaming where the idea of an actual play of people playing D&D live on a stream was not quite so common as it is now. Right. So I think that too had a lot to do with it, is that there just wasn't that much out there. So
did you sort of cold contact the people that you ended up casting? Because essentially you're casting, I assume, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I did sort of cold contact each of them. I hadn't really communicated with any of them previously. I think little passing things here and there, just because we were all, the thing that kind of connected us is we all had YouTube channels and we were all making content about tabletop role-playing games. And so for me, it was just like that person seems cool. I like what they have to say about games. I'm going to reach out to them and see if they want to play because originally it was going to be a one-shot. It was in just a one-shot D&D game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's like the factoid, the Provokers factoid. It was going to be a one shot. Yeah. Right? Like imagine a universe where, well, things probably
You
wouldn't be
play
that
one
different,
and you're
but
like, well, that was pretty good. Let's
yeah,
let's
that's
do a
pretty good.
science fiction game next week or something.
Because that's honestly what I thought was going to happen, is that we were going to get together, we were going to play some D&D, and it was going to be fun, and then we would go our separate ways. But instead, about halfway through the session, I just remember thinking like, I'm having a lot of
Yeah.
fun. These guys are fun. Like, and I feel
Yeah.
like they're having fun too. And then the technical difficulties at the end, cutting off the ending, I was like, well, we gotta keep going, right? We gotta have another session, and then 15 or whatever sessions later, the rest is history.
It makes some sense. I mean, I'm because what I've noticed with the people that like other YouTube people that I've like collaborated with, I tend to pick people whose stuff I enjoy, and I think I enjoy it because I mean, part of it is the personality, part of it's what they're doing, part of it's like their ideas, and maybe like-minded people are kind of attracted to like finding other like-minded people. So I would imagine you're choosing people that you love to watch what they create, so you're probably going to get along really well.
Yeah.
And,
and that was that was really it, because it was like they were creating videos that I enjoyed watching and that I like learned things from and found myself agreeing with. And so I could just, it wasn't like I could tell like we're going to be friends, but it was like, I bet we get along and have fun playing a game together. So yeah.
Did you so I know that you're at like 25,000 subs, and you sort of touched upon the channel sort of like maybe blowing up at a certain point and being at a few thousand for a while. You weren't ever sort of thinking that YouTube was going to be your thing, but did you have a strategy, or did it just sort of happen by accident, or were you like were you looking at algorithms that said like 9 p.m. to 12 p.m. on Fridays in Jakarta are really hot right now?
That's prime time to
prime
upload,
time, baby,
yeah.
for actual plays. Or was it just like it just took off?
No, so I've never been very intentional about it, and I think that so it's funny you mentioned 25,000 subs. It used to be more. It used to be close to 30,000 subs, and because I haven't been super active on the channel anymore and I very seldom post, naturally people will fall off, and that's just part of what happens. But at the time when it was kind of going up, I think that it was just like, I don't know, I was very fortunate, honestly. And I hate to say that I've just stumbled into it, but it was like I've never really paid attention to like, okay, what do people like? What are my videos that perform really well?
Right.
What are people watching a lot of? What are people not watching a lot of? It's always been stuff that I like want to make.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where I was like, I would tell myself to just have fun with it. Yeah. Because there was a time where I felt like, okay, I can pay attention to what people want, and I can make those videos. And whenever I would do that, I wouldn't have fun, and it would be a frustrating kind of stressful experience. And half the time the videos wouldn't even happen because I would just run out of things to say or whatever. And so I found that, if I was just genuine and just like genuinely showed, my love and my passion for RPGs and talked about things that I wanted to talk about, the people who would show up were people that I liked interacting with. And so I just kept doing that. And I think that for never really marketing myself very well, like I'll take 25,000 subs. Exactly. That's pretty good. So, I mean, that's just absolutely nothing compared to so many other channels. And I mean, Nate, WASD20, he started on the Provokers. He's 100,000 subs and beyond at this point because he puts out videos consistently, and his videos are great quality. He has good things to say, but that just was never my shtick, I guess. That wasn't my deal.
Right. No, I think that's, and it's probably a cliche to say at this point, but, you should do what you enjoy, and it won't be like, and the thing is, I'm like you mentioned Nate or whatever, I'm sure there are people out there that maybe he enjoys that part of it, like that challenge or that that kind of those like maneuvering through those obstacles and like figuring out this and that. Like, you know, different people have different things that they really enjoy, and you know, we have a variety of wants and needs, I think. Do you feel like the channel and streaming and running games on it and giving advice, has that like taught you anything or affected like your creative process?
Oh man.
At all?
Yeah. I think I would say so. I don't know how specifically, but I would say so. No, if I really think about it, I think that like making content for YouTube and having, and not even necessarily making content for YouTube, but like having YouTube be the outlet for what I wanted to talk about, more than anything else, has honestly, it gave me confidence that if I'm making stuff, it doesn't matter what I think people will want or what they'll like or what they'll enjoy, because most of the time, if I just put a lot of like passion into something that I'm making and then put it out there, there will be at least some people that will get some use out of it. And that has continued with the games that I've made. The Mecha Hack is a perfect example where it's a game that I created primarily for myself because I wanted a game to be able to easily run mech games. And now it's like really like I see people talk about it all the time, just like word of mouth, just like, oh, you should try Mecha Hack, like when people are looking for like giant robot games. And I never anticipated people getting any use out of the game, but YouTube putting content out for YouTube, running games for and streaming them to YouTube really instilled in me the idea that like if you just like make something and put it out into the world, there will be an audience for it.
It's got a very it's got like a very immediate payoff. You know, that's something I kind of noticed about it myself. You know, for many years I would like to write stories, or I'd like to play games or run games, or make like short films, and I would show them to like my close circle of friends, and they would love them. And I love that immediate payoff, like walking away from an evening after I'd run a game or showed like just a short 5-minute little silly documentary on something or an interview with someone. And what's cool about YouTube is, even though, and I really like, I meant like, you know, what I said, I've got a very small community, but I actually get to talk with those people like on Discord, or people email me and I'm not overwhelmed or whatever. And what is nice is I'll run a game and I'm like, you're asking me a question about what happened 2.5 hours into a game I ran. I can't believe you're emailing me about this, or whatever. And it's a nice thing to know. There's even one person is watching it, and you're right. Like I feel like a kind of a renewed sense of confidence. And
totally.
What do you think makes, now you've obviously transitioned to the big leagues. You're in the pros. How is it? You're no longer playing those scrimmage games and those
I've been drafted.
Those minor league like games. Like what do you think allowed you to sort of make that transition and helped you become like a pro as opposed to like a skilled hobbyist? Or is there a difference? Is the difference just in the amount, like you put one thing out and someone else doesn't, or is there something else? Or
the line between the skilled hobbyist and the professional is very, very blurry and wavers constantly. But like for me, the transition, right out of college, I started picking up freelance gigs wherever I could, just because even if I was working at a hobby shop or a video store or working in web dev, like whatever I was doing, I wanted to also be picking away at some other stuff, working on projects that I was excited about. And so like right out of college, I would just start contacting companies that I liked, board game companies, RPG companies, and I would never hear back from anyone, or very seldom would hear back from people. And I managed to get some freelance editing work with Fantasy Flight Games. And that was like my first like gig. And I worked on some board games for them. And like it wasn't constant work. It wasn't regular work. It wasn't super well paying work, but it was work in games, and it was working on board games that I liked to play and expansions for games that I'd played before. And so I just kind of kept doing that. And then eventually I had enough stuff on a little list of things I worked on that I could then show that to another publisher and be like, I've worked on some games. See, these are probably games that you've heard of.
Yeah.
And then that would allow them to kind of take a chance on someone who was young, who was untested, who wasn't necessarily in the credits of any big games. But that all kind of started to steamroll. And in 2017, I got laid off from my job, the technical editing job that I mentioned previously. And I decided to give full-time freelance a go at that point. And it wasn't immediate. And I had to kind of splash in a lot of other stuff. I worked in a lot of like web design and web development and stuff like while I got some clients under me. But eventually I started to realize like I have fewer and fewer non-game clients in my roster. I have fewer and fewer non-game projects that I'm working on. And just about like, I don't know, 2.5 or 3 years ago, I realized that I was like full-time games. Right. And it wasn't anything that I like, I gotta do it. It was just like, these are the projects that I'm taking on because I like doing them. And all of a sudden, it's all I'm working on.
Right. And it was, and obviously, now this is a potentially scary question. You happy to have sort of like slipped into gaming without even knowing it? Or is there a part of you that thinks back to your English major and thinks, there was actually a little other something I had planned?
Yeah, it's weird to be doing it full time, because like any sort of job, any source of income, there are things about it that I would change, and there are things about it that I don't like. And freelancing is great because it's so flexible, and it's terrible because it's so inconsistent. And there are lots of things about it that I would change, but ultimately, like I feel very fortunate to be doing what I'm doing, because the people who work in games full time is a small number. It is a small. There are a lot of people who work in games who are also doing other things, who are working other jobs, who have day jobs, who then, moonlight and work in RPGs. But like, I've kind of managed to make a foothold for myself in just being persistent. And I don't know, there was no amount of like hustle on my end that I had to like do to make it happen. I just like have been genuine. I've been consistent, and it's just sort of, I don't know, it just sort of happened for me, I guess. And that's why I often say like I just stumbled into it, because I don't feel that there was ever like a direct like effort towards it. It just has kind of happened.
But now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I did a little bit of research again on this, on Absolute Tabletop. Which is like an online, I don't know exactly what the terminology is, but it's a platform for finding cool like stuff to add to like your gaming sessions. You've got your rules, you've got Mecha Hack, I think, is up there, and a lot of other stuff like from a group of co-founders, I think.
A couple of Provokers in there too.
Yes, I was going to say.
Was
that a little bit of what prompted that? Because that was a couple of years before.
That was, yes. So I started Absolute Tabletop with Tim Carney, James Carney, and Michael Barker. I think in 2015 is when we started it, around then. And I'm like checking with you, like I know that's your research.
That's what the about says, and that's what I have in the research. Okay, but my research has been wrong before.
No, if that's what the about said, then that's got to be it. But that was just a culmination of us kind of being like, hey, we really like hanging out, we really like gaming together. And I think it like we all kind of like gathered together at one point over the summer at my house. Like we all met in person for the first time.
Oh,
like
are you all like in the same?
No, so we like Barker flies up to Washington fairly often because he has a bunch of family up here, and so we planned to meet up. And then Tim was like, what if I fly up too? And Nate was like, I also have family in Seattle. So
Right.
what if I come up? And so it just turned into this thing where we got together, and it was actually an annual thing for a little while. We would get together every summer, but Absolute Tabletop was kind of born out of that, of us wanting to like make things together and specifically like make RPG products. And while I still had a day job and everything, like in the evenings and on the weekends, I would be writing stuff for Absolute Tabletop. I'd be writing books, and it was like the first time that I'd like collaboratively like made stuff with other people. I had tried to make adventures before. I had tried to publish stuff for RPGs before. I had like tried my hand at creating rules and games and things, and it just, I needed other people. I needed other minds. I needed people to bounce ideas off of. I needed people to come in and read my stuff and tell me, you know, this is good, this is shit, or whatever. And so like that kind of started the wheels spinning of like, I might like to do this all the time. That would be fun to do this all the time. And so Absolute Tabletop has continued. We're still making books. And I'm doing that in addition to the freelance side of things, where I work with other publishers. And I feel like I learn things from working with other publishers. Every publisher is different. Every publisher does things a different way. I learn things, and I then bring that back to my own creation with Absolute Tabletop. And I'm able to apply the things that I learn, you know, in making my own stuff. So I'm like in a very unique position to be able to do that.
What was it kind of like? Because it sounds like it happened. I mean, obviously you're working at it, but it sounds like, relatively speaking, there was a bit of a bell curve there where it just sort of suddenly takes off. What was it like suddenly working for the pros? Like, were they, I mean, did they give you a big list of, like, did they say, we need somebody to write this, or we need someone to edit that, or we need somebody to such and such, and they gave it to you? Or were they coming to you with ideas?
Yeah. So the thing that I think really kicked stuff off for me, like freelance wise, was I interviewed at Wizards of the Coast a few times for a few different jobs, including editor, the game designer role. I was in that office a few times interviewing, and I never got hired in a full-time position, but I think they liked me enough where they were like, we'd love to toss you some contract work though. And that's when I worked on a book called Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is it's one of the Waterdeep adventures for 5th edition. It came out a few years ago. I got brought on to work on that book with some other really talented editors. And I worked on that book, and that was probably the single biggest thing for me in terms of being able to like market myself to other companies, is like, I've worked with Wizards of the Coast. And if you're able to say, I worked with Wizards of the Coast, I worked with Paizo, I worked with, you know, whatever, one of these companies, then you're able to, that kind of gives you a little bit of like credence and like, I don't know, it gives you a bit of a reputation, I guess. And so that is when I was able to start approaching publishers and seeing everyone always needs contract editors. Very few companies have in-house editors working on their books, but they contract that stuff out. And so I just contact companies, and then eventually you work with enough people, and you have enough people who know your work and know that you're a good person to work with, that they're then recommending you for positions they hear about.
Right.
And it just kind of like snowballs from there. Yeah. Yeah.
What, so you've mentioned editing a couple times here, and what I was sort of interested in, because I think there's a lot of like confusion and mistrust of of the differences like in proofreading, editing. And what interests me here, and maybe it was just a slip up, or maybe you really meant it, earlier on when we were talking about you going, you know, getting an English major, you had mentioned editing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because I hear so many people say, I want to write. I want to be a writer. I want to, but there are the unsung heroes of everything. Like like this tax bill that I paid Cambridge for my car on, there's got to be someone that sits down and says, no. You can't say, give it over now. You have to say something softer and gentler.
Right.
So what what were you specifically looking to become an editor?
Mhm.
And what is it that an editor versus a proofreader versus other things I may not be familiar, terms I may not be familiar with, does?
Yeah. Yeah. So for some reason, I've always been very drawn to editing. I really enjoy taking other people's writing and helping them kind of craft it and hone it and make it like just super readable and accessible and get across the ideas that they're trying to get across. I've always like really enjoyed that process. Um, for some reason, I have a hard time writing for other people. That's always been a struggle of mine. And I take writing gigs here and there, but for the most part, I enjoy writing for myself. I enjoy writing for my own projects, the books and the games that I want to make. Um, Editing for me is just like a natural kind of thing. And I think that it has to do too with me, the way that I dungeon master and the way I think about things when I master a game is that it's the same sort of like little pieces of my brain that work with editing.
Mm.
And so I've always really enjoyed that
Mm.
and been drawn to it. And I editors are kind of like the bassists of the creative world, where it's like you don't necessarily hear the bass when you're listening to a song, but if it wasn't there, you would notice immediately. And I feel like editors are kind of that bottom end. They kind of hold things down and kind of tie everything together and make it cohesive. So for me, like that's always been something that I've really enjoyed and something that I think I'm good at. Here I said I think I'm good at it.
There we go. Good for
I
you,
did it.
Mr. Click. Good job.
But in terms of like the differences between like, because you have like editing, but then you also have like within editing, you have like line editing, copy editing, developmental editing, and then you have things like proofreading. And these are all like very different tasks, but there's a lot of blur between them where they're all kind of also happening simultaneously as you're editing a document. So for me, the way I kind of like break it down for myself and for anyone I'm working with is I break it down into you have proofreading and you have editing. For me, proofreading is looking at a finished chunk of text, making it consistent grammatically, making sure that it follows its own rules as well as the rules of whatever style they happen to be using, usually like Chicago Manual of Style. It's about fixing any errors, any typos, making sure that it reads well and it all hangs together. Whereas editing for me is more about involves rewriting, it involves stylistic choices, swapping out words for better words that are more clear, more concise. Editing is a little bit more heavy-handed, I feel. Whereas proofreading is more about like, hey, I've written this thing, already been through it a ton, I'm about to put it on the page, can you look at it? Editing is like, I don't know what to do with this, can you look at it?
So then the proofreading is kind of like a final polish
Yeah,
on something
the proofreading
that's
would
already
be,
had the big chunks of it sort of moved around. And
polish is it's a perfect word for what proofreading is.
An
me.
editor approves of my language. I have to tell my students.
Nice word use. I would leave that word in there if I came across it in the document.
Thanks. I have been accused of being a little wordy, but when I get the right word, I get the right word. So then, is there like a routine in this? Do you just sort of sit down with the work and you start on page 1 and go straight through it? Like, do you have to sit down, I assume, maybe before and say, okay, what are you going for? Are you using, you said Chicago Manual of Style, or are you using like, I don't know, something else? Get their sort of the look and feel they're going for before you tackle it? Or
so generally I do, and it really depends on what I'm working on too. Like if I'm working on something for a big client, like a big name like publisher, they'll usually tell me what they need, what they want. They'll give me a style guide to follow. But if it's I work a lot with just solo publishers, people who are just making their own stuff, either with a small team or on their own, and they're looking for someone to proofread or edit their stuff, then that usually involves me sitting with them and actually talking with them about the project and what they're wanting, what they're looking for, what to expect from me in terms of like what I'm going to be doing to the words and things like that. But the process itself is usually I get whatever writing I'm handed, and I have a bunch of global checks that I do. I have a list that grows by the day of things that I check for in every piece of writing that I open. And I do my global checks, and I make sure that it's just, I've got everything set, and then I start going through it line by line. And usually I just go through in order. I'll go one pass with heavy edit, and then a second pass just kind of skimming, making sure I've hit everything. I've made the changes I want to make. Everything looks good, that hangs together, making sure that the stylistic choice that I made 18 pages in, I then reflect 3 pages in when I notice that it wasn't changed there.
So it's
just a very exactly. It's consistency is like my big thing, is like making sure that like it doesn't really matter how you capitalize things or how you spell this word that you made up, but it's got to be consistent throughout the whole thing, so it feels cohesive. So usually 2 or 3 passes through, and then sometimes it's a document that's 10-20 pages, and sometimes it's 200 pages, a big honking thing. So,
are you a paper person? Are you a digital person, or are you like a tablet person? What do you prefer to when you get out that red pen?
Yeah. So I do all of my stuff digitally. So usually I'm working in Word or Google Docs. Occasionally when I'm working with like a board game company, they will sometimes hand me the rule book like finished, like it's laid out in a PDF and not like text that I can edit. So in that case, I might, put it on my tablet and mark it up with a stylus or whatever. But in terms of like printing stuff out and reading it, that's helpful, but I find that it often is a little more work than it's worth. And I can usually catch things a little easier digitally. Because,
interesting.
For instance, if I catch something, I can then, I wonder if that mistake was made anywhere else in this document.
Right.
I could very easily like look throughout the entire document to see, did they spell that wrong earlier too? I didn't notice, So that's, digital for me has become like my preferred. That's the only way I'll do it.
And are you working then with like a stylus? Are you literally working just with like a keyboard?
Yeah, just a keyboard. Just I use whatever track changes or track revisions is available. So Word has track changes. You can track your changes in Google Docs. So that way, whoever I'm passing the document to after I'm done with it, they're able to see exactly what changes I made, and they're able to accept or reject the changes, because again, a lot of the changes that I'm making are not necessarily, this is a rule that you have to use whatever. It's like stylistic, like I think this would sound better this way.
Or perhaps they're doing that in some other book, or there's some reason, or that line,
exactly,
whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
So when the wet behind the ears writer comes to you with like doughy eyes, and they're so excited, and they have this manuscript, and they hand it over to you, and they're frightened you're about to break their heart, what is it typically, if there is there like, are there typical errors that you see? I'm not talking about maybe spelling errors, but I mean like things that don't necessarily line up, like as an editor, or the things, or proofreader, or the things that you typically see?
Yeah,
specifically with games, I guess, too.
With games, the biggest problem that I see with games is just like overwriting, just like too many words to say. Why use many words when fewer words do? Like I see there's, a lot of that's and wills and passive language in this sentence, and I can condense that down into half the length, and also it sounds better and is more active and exciting to read. So that's like the main thing with games is like just overwriting. But candidly, I like when people overwrite, because then I feel like I've got a bigger slab of marble to then chip away at to make something really good. And so I like having work come to me that is a little overwritten, because it's really easy for me to glean exactly what they were trying to say and say it in fewer, more succinct, more simple language.
Yeah. I feel like, I kind of agree. My own editing experience and proofreading is just from, my students for 20 something years, from, college to elementary level. And I feel like when the thought, like the hard part is getting the thought on the page. or getting a thought on the page. If you can get a thought on the page, you can diagnose it. This is the opposite thought of what I really meant to say. So now we have a direction to go in, or this is, the wrong nuance thought, or this is wrong because it's using the wrong word. And so it's easier to sort of like work on that. But when there's nothing on the page or not enough, it's hard to say what to do, because then it's, in a way, you're doing the writing part. I mean, unless there's something that is like really like telling about it, like, well, this book is supposed to be about mice, and you only mention mice on page 3. The other 200 are about a dog. You need mice. Right. Like, that's something easy, but
gotta get more mice.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you then think is, like, kind of with all of this in mind, like your experience with the channel, your experience, just sending stuff out and interviewing and all of that, what's the best way for like a young creative or older creative, or any creative person, to get their stuff like seen or developed or sold? Like, do you think, should they be going out there and showing this stuff to the big publishers? Should they jump on YouTube? Should they just be creating some cool PDFs and put them up on drive-through? Or what do you think? Would you have any advice or recommendations? Or
I mean, so the biggest things for me were finding other people, and it's not even necessarily people that you're creating things with, but people that you can talk to about making stuff, people who will read your stuff, people who will offer feedback, and then, you being able to do that in kind for them. Just having collaborators was the biggest thing for me in terms of finally making things and putting things out and publishing stuff, was having other people to help me do it. And with the internet, with social media, with things like Discord, with things like Slack and Facebook and Twitter, it's like really never been easier to network with people. I hate that word, network with people, but just make connections with people and share your stuff around. And then from there, the biggest piece of advice is just make something. It's not going to be good necessarily. It's not going to be your favorite thing that you've ever made. You're going to look back on it in years and you're going to be like, I would do that totally different. I'm not proud of that work anymore. But you're going to put it out and you're going to learn, what does it take to write, to edit, to get this into a layout, to put it out as a PDF on DriveThruRPG or itch.io. And you're going to learn a little bit more with every release that you do. And I think that the final piece of advice is to start small. Don't think about, how can I publish this world that I've created? I want to publish a 200-page world Bible. Make a 10-page PDF about a specific thing in your world. Choose one town in your world, or choose one mechanic of a game that you want to try out, and just put that out there for people to look at. And you might get 1 or 2 people looking at this thing, or buying it, or reviewing it, or whatever, but you will have learned something and you will know what you want to make next, generally. So find other people, just make something. Don't try to make your magnum opus right out of the gate.
No Citizen Kanes.
Don't do the Citizen Kane right out of the gate.
Unless you are Orson Welles. In which case, by all means.
The caveat here is, if you are Orson Welles, you can do whatever you want.
Yes. Well, this kind of brings me to something that I think, as a teacher, I will often use role-playing games in my classroom, because I actually see them as they're very powerful ways to teach, and they're very they can really help the students kind of develop and change and reflect and all of that. And I was sort of wondering about this, and I've talked to different people about it, and different people have different opinions on this, but RPGs, I think, can, in my opinion, do a lot more than people often give them credit for. And
Yeah.
but like in the heat of ad-libbing or in the heat of creation, in the heat of doing, like artistic work, sometimes we touch upon sensitive topics or ideas. What do you think, like, as like dungeon masters, game masters, players, creators, how do we handle situations where we may be stumbling into territory that might be sensitive or otherwise, delicate to sort of talk about, to run a game about, to write about?
Right.
Do you have any feelings on that, or?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good topic of discussion, and it's something that, like, as someone who makes games, who publishes stuff, like, it's something that I think about a lot. And like, I feel that we're seeing a little bit of a renaissance in this regard, where games are coming packaged with, tools to be able to explore some of those more sensitive topics in a safe way, where you can have a game where you're like, okay, we're going to be tackling some big topics, maybe some more mature topics, some things that might make people uncomfortable or emotional at the table, but we have these tools at our disposal to be able to navigate these things and explore potentially uncomfortable subjects without making ourselves uncomfortable to the point of not enjoying the game anymore. So I'm a big proponent of like safety tools in games, of having things like an X card, or a big thing for me is doing like a session 0 and having our green lights, our yellow lights, and our red lights, or lines and veils, things that we're not okay with having in the game, things we're okay with, things we want to see. It's just a really good way as game masters, as developers, to be able to create content for people that is going to excite them, that's going to be sometimes a little scary, sometimes a little uncomfortable, but we can do so with confidence because we know that if anyone at the table has any sort of issue, they know what they can do to steer the game back on track.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a subset of people that think that safety tools kind of like take away from that aspect of games, or censor ideas or prevent them from exploring more sensitive topics. But I feel like those safety tools allow us to do that easier, and like I said, with more confidence, because okay, we're gonna tackle this mature thing, we're gonna talk about like sex or violence, or we're gonna like have this plot line about slavery in this game, but we're going to do so with the care that topic deserves.
I actually really like that idea, because I've been trying to articulate in my head how I feel about this. Like, to me, role-playing games are as valid a storytelling form as going out to see a film or reading a book.
Yeah.
And to me, I sort of feel like, I feel like I feel like when you go to see a film, you sort of know what you're getting into. You know exactly what's going to happen. But when you're sitting down at a table with a group of people where you're ad-libbing, making things up, it's possible to sort of veer into territory that might not be like comfortable for everyone, or may not be what someone anticipated, or may not be someone's idea of having fun on a Friday night. And what I feel like is, I feel like as a teacher, as a game master, I am actually very interested in exploring deeper issues, like of culture and of like,
Absolutely.
identity, of like meaning in life and all of that. I want to explore those things with the same sort of palette I would have available to me as a writer or as a film director, right? Because the great thing about being a writer or a film director is you can write a really bad book, you give it to your editor gives you second thoughts on it, you go, oh yeah, maybe I can say it like this, maybe I can make my point stronger like that. But when you're ad-libbing at a table, you don't really have that chance. And so I often sort of thought, well, if you're not using safety tools, or if you're not like, I feel like you're not giving the game enough of a chance to, you're not looking at it like and giving it a chance to really be interesting. Like,
Yeah.
and you know, people can play however they want, but to me, I always thought I want to run a game that is going to talk and make my players think. So when they go home at, you know, 11 or 12 o'clock at night or whatever, they're thinking about like, my goodness, that story's developing. This is really interesting. This situation is morally very gray. Which direction should I go in? So sorry, I just got on my
this is a great
soapbox.
conversation that we're having here. Yeah. I feel you.
So do you think I think we've just answered the next question I was going to ask, but I mean, are RPGs like a valid medium for like exploring, you know, sexuality, race, religion, mental health, same important subjects you would with a book and a film?
Absolutely. And I think I feel more comfortable exploring those topics for myself, for other players around the table, if we've had that session 0, if we've had that chat before the game starts about the expectations that people have about the things that they want to explore, the things that they'd rather avoid, because then it turns into this really cool collaborative experience where everyone feels like they're not going into the session unsure necessarily of what to expect. And that's not that the game is not going to surprise you still, because it's going to surprise you, but you're not going to be blindsided by something that you're not necessarily interested in exploring. So RPGs are an incredibly valid outlet for that. I myself have benefited from playing RPGs and exploring different topics about myself and the world. And literally every person I've talked to who's ever played any RPG agrees with that, yeah, it's been beneficial to me. So things like safety tools, going back to that, allow you to do that more freely, I feel.
You mentioned earlier on, and this kind of dovetails into what we're talking about now. Like you mentioned that you hadn't been posting as much on your channel, and I was really impressed. So we're talking about people that have sort of dropped out for a while or whatever, but DBJ had dropped out for a bit. But I know you dropped out a bit at least for the channel about 11, 12 months ago. And I was very impressed by one of the last videos. I think it was the last one that you made before.
Yeah.
You were expressing yourself in like a really honest manner and talking about your situation and talking about like how things had been going. And to me, this sort of matches with and tracks with what you're saying also about the channel being a little bit of an outlet for you as well. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, you were very honest, and I find that as a teacher and just as a human being, I find that to be like incredibly impressive and very admirable. And I think as a teacher, I also see it as very helpful to other people who may be in similar situations. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe like what sort of advice you might give to people who are having feelings not unlike maybe you are having? Or
no, absolutely. And like, not to get too heavy, but I just feel like the world that we live in today is like kind of a scary place. It's certainly, the world feels scarier to me now than it ever has. And there are so many like things that I worry about, both in the greater world and in my own personal life. And so for me, like, I feel like a lot of people struggle with everything from I feel a little down today to, I don't even know how to get up out of bed in the morning. And I've experienced that full spectrum. And for me, the thing that has been the most helpful is hearing people talk about it. So oftentimes things that affect our mental health can feel very isolating, and depression in particular is a very isolating experience because you feel that there's no way that I can explain to someone else how I feel because I don't even quite understand it myself. But then you come across a video or a tweet or a TikTok of someone talking, and you being like, that is how I feel. They just put words to a feeling that I have or an experience that I've had. And that to me is the most helpful thing, just to know that I'm not alone in the things that I think and feel and experience. And so for me, making that video and just being honest with people in general is like a twofold thing. Of one, I do get something out of being open and honest and talking about it. It feels as though I take something that I'm holding on to and I give some of it up. I'm exchanging energy with people, even if I'm not seeing them. I'm sharing those thoughts and those feelings with people, and being open and honest about the YouTube channel, because ultimately people aren't there to hear me talk about my life, but they'd like to know what's going on if I haven't posted on the channel for a while. But then the other thing is, maybe I can help somebody if I talk about it in the way that I have been helped in hearing other people talk about it. And, you know, obviously there's only so much good that talking about it can do, but it has been extremely helpful for me in the past. And, you know, just based on the number of comments that I've gotten on that video where people are talking about, I've been struggling too, or like, oh man, I feel you, like I've been having a hard time. That helps. It helps me. It helps that person. And so there was a time in my life where I wouldn't talk about that kind of stuff, but I'm past that point of caring what people might think about that. And the reality is that there are so few people that would have an issue with me talking about that. And those aren't people that I want to associate with anyway. So
I was honestly I mean, I was disappointed because I'd been watching your stuff, and it seems like just when I kind of got into it, you're like, well, I think I'm going to quit the channel.
Hey, I'm out of here. Yeah.
Out of here.
Yeah.
See ya. But what I was impressed by, and this is something that it's like, as a teacher, I feel like it's often like the secret to teaching is that you don't actually have to be able to do the stuff you're saying. What you have to do is be able to sort of pass on what people should sort of be doing, and then, you know, hope that they take some of that. Like, I think I've taken some of the things that my teachers have taught me and done some good with them, but not everything, because I'm only human. But like, the thing that impressed me was just the fact that as I was listening to it, it starts out, actually, to be honest, from start to finish, you're fairly positive. And from start to finish, you take something where you confess your feelings, much of your feelings. I would assume you're still protecting a lot of stuff, but you confess a lot of your feelings, and you turn that into, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is what my plan is. Here's what I'm going to work on. I'm really excited about this thing. I'm really excited about that thing. And I liked how you took the self-reflection and you turned it into something creative and useful to, you know, of course, to you, but also to those that are watching. And I think it's fair to say, at that point when you made that video, all of us had been in a dark place for like at least a year and a half to 2 years before that. Like, I think, to be honest, it's surprising you didn't reach that point a year before, right? Because all of us, like, this channel came from that deep, dark place of that loneliness, being at home.
From the abyss emerges,
living with my aunts with no money and having just moved to Boston. So I think what I was most impressed by was just the fact that you turned it into something really creatively, like, rich. And if you don't mind my asking, how's it been in the last year, like, creatively, personally, and you've been doing okay? Everything?
Yeah.
Good. Glad to hear it.
It's a big question.
Good night, everyone. See you next week.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I would say that in general, from like a high level, I'm doing a lot better and feeling a lot more in control. And I feel like I have a lot more tools at my disposal to be able to sift through feelings and emotions and thoughts and things. And I also feel like I'm starting to. So the biggest thing is I no longer am fighting against my own inclinations and the way that my brain works and the feelings that I have, just because I feel that it's not the norm, or it's not what most people would do, or I need to fit into this. I need to be productive in this way that is deemed the way to be productive. Right. And instead, I'm just kind of leaning into the weird muck of my consciousness and realizing that, you know, I am a person that has struggles. Those struggles, unfortunately, affect my ability to do the things that I love, and unfortunately, the things that I love doing are also the things that pay my bills. Right. And so everything is all kind of tied up into this awful nest. But right now, in general, I feel that I'm the most well that I've been in a long time. And I'm working on a lot of cool things. And I'm really excited about the stuff that I'm working on, specifically like with Absolute Tabletop, some of the stuff that we're working on right now. And I feel that I'm a bit on the cusp of a renaissance, if you will, of things that I want to make and things that I want to do, streams that I want to do, things like that. So long story short, I'm doing well.
That's
How are
great.
you doing, man?
Well, no one's ever asked me that question before.
I wasn't prepared.
I don't know. Everything's okay. We're all fine. We're fine. Okay. I don't have a blaster to shoot the control panel here, but
boring conversation anyway.
I wasn't gonna say that because I'm the host and that would be rude. But it's very funny when the guest says that. That totally works. You can. I'm up here to be just like have pot shots taken at me. Well, I really appreciate, like, as a teacher, like, I appreciate how articulate you are, like, in expressing yourself, and I think it's really a wonderful thing. And I can also say, like, you know, to be honest, like, the thing that caught me about it, it wouldn't have caught me so much to watch if I didn't. Obviously, I don't have the same feelings, but like similar feelings. And I think a lot of us, like I was saying at that time, we're going through very similar things. And the idea of recharging your batteries for 11 or 12 months, like a creative person, I can only imagine there must be like ideas flowing out of your head constantly.
Now. Yes.
Like just onto the page. Well, let me ask you this. We only have a few minutes left, and I've kept you for far too long. But how do you see, like, what would you like to see, like, in the future, like in the gaming, in the tabletop RPG kind of landscape? Like, is there something you'd really like to see coming along? Is there something you're gonna have here for us soon, or?
Yeah. So in general, I'm really excited about the shift that I'm seeing a little bit in the industry. Without getting too much into it, like the whole snafu with the OGL and WotC kind of.
Oh, did something happen with the OGL?
I can't really remember.
Yeah. I thought it was Twitter. I thought it was Elon Musk on Twitter. Was that 2 weeks before?
It was just Twitter. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, I know every week is a new nightmare online. But the thing with people maybe looking to other games, I don't necessarily want to see D&D like dethroned or toppled or anything like that. I don't think that that's going to happen. It's still a powerhouse in the industry, but I love that, you know, Pathfinder sold out. Everyone's looking at other games. Everyone's looking at different genres of game. Everyone's looking at different publishers and indie games and things. And I feel like there are so many cool things being made in the tabletop game space that people don't read and don't play, or that at least don't get like played in public, played at cons, played on streams, things like that. I could see there with the OGL snafu happening, people kind of paying closer attention to other games. And that's just something that I would like to see, that I'm really excited about. As someone who publishes non-D&D stuff, I would love it if people would pay more attention to non-D&D stuff. So that's in general what I'm excited about. And then specifically, I'm working right now on a new mecha hack game. And it is more, I don't want to say too much because I haven't talked about it a ton, but it's going to be more fantasy leaning.
Oh.
And it's going to play around with some fantastical elements, some magic. But it's a really cool setting that I've been working on that I am starting to piece together, and I'm going to be play testing soon and hopefully publishing soon. So more mecha hack stuff. I'm just very into
Is there something on your shelf back there that we should know about? Is there one or two or 85 of them?
85 giant robots. Yeah.
Are those all
that's
Gundams?
What I'm. So most of them are from Gundam, but there's also this white one here in the middle. That's Escaflowne, which is like a more fantasy mecha. This guy over here on the end is an armored core. So there's a vast array of mecha back there.
So I'm aware of your habit. I do follow you on Twitter, and like 80% of your posts are about findings like mecha resisting purchases of Gundam model kits. And you know, if you need help, I've found that there is light out there.
There is
from building.
Is there a hotline that I could call?
I have a sponsor. I can maybe hook you up with a sponsor. I go to meetings on Sundays at the
I
Unitarian
can't do Sundays.
Church.
That's usually when I build models.
You're just now okay. As a sort of unofficial sponsor of you right now, you're just making excuses to enable. I will not enable you. I used to do a ton of. I didn't do the Gundam kits because they were way out of my price range. And this will date me, and you'll all know how old I am. But I used to do the Robotech Defender kits.
Listen,
which
I love Robotech.
I did them like crazy. I had worse than you. I had a whole bunch, like my wall, you know, they would like fall over in the middle of the night on top of me on my bed and stuff. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't move. I'm going to break like the antenna on.
Break my Robotechs. Yeah.
Yes. And then one day, a group of friends came into the room and they locked the door. And they sat me down and they pointed to all the kits. They showed me the garbage can, and they turned the garbage can over, and all these mecha instruction booklets fell out and sprue. And they showed me all the melted sprue I'd been using, and they talked about the smell in my bedroom of melted sprue as I tried to make like thin antenna and all that stuff. And they said, this can't go on. And like I said, I've been in the support group for years now, and if you want, we'll talk after this. We'll talk. We'll do some private talk about.
That would be great. I'll get you out. You know, I've slowed down quite a bit on my acquiring of model kits.
Sure, you have. I know.
The thing that threw it into sharp relief for me was I had to move everything out of my office at some point last year to do some I had to deep clean the carpets in here. So I moved all of my stuff out, and I was like stacking all of my model kit boxes sort of in one place in the house. And it was the first time I'd seen them all kind of stacked up, and it was taller than my child. It was wider than my child. And there were a few dozen kits that I hadn't even opened.
Yeah.
I hadn't even opened.
They're still in the cellophane. Yeah.
I was like, oh,
I totally
gotta rein it in.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. Absolutely. Like I said, we'll talk. I'll give you a number. That's a hotline.
Yeah, that would be great.
Hook you up.
That would be great because I'm struggling.
Well, with that, Matt, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for coming on the program. I really appreciate it. I don't have to tell anyone that's watching right now, because I think, with the exception of maybe Kevin CM Bieta, the chat has not lit up quite as much as this. So for those of you there in the chat that I have ignored for an hour and a half. I do apologize. I'm not really very good at like streaming, at like running the stream, talking to a person and like answering all my mother's texts all at the same time. So one of those things has got to go, and it's usually the chat. But I really appreciate you all being there and showing up for Matt.
It seems like they're mostly entertaining themselves.
I think
over
so.
there,
That's the best.
That's
yeah,
great.
That's the best thing is when the chat is getting. I love it when I'm, people talk in the. It's just so much fun. So thank you all, and please do. I don't have to tell you this, but if you check out the links below, I'm sure. I have a funny feeling most of you showed up for the Matt on that side and not me. You should, but you haven't. If you haven't checked out his stuff, please do check it out. He makes some great stuff. He's doing some cool things, and I only have the coolest people on my show, so you can. It's got the Matt Yancik seal of approval. Thank you all for showing up. I do actually have a guest that will be coming on next week. I haven't announced it yet because it's kind of tentative at this point, but Roleplayer with 1,000 Faces is going to be back. We're sort of back on track here. But thank you all very much. And if you're going to be playing a game this weekend, make sure it is an awesome game. And please stay safe. And we will see you all again on Roleplayer with 1,000 Faces in a week or so. So thank you all very much, and thank you, Matt Click.
Thank you. Thank you.